to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello students, a very warm welcome to the TV learning program. As usual, I'm your teacher Herbert, and I will be taking you through the biology of thin air true. And we are still on the same unit, which is Unit 10, which is concerning about gaseous exchange in human and in plants. That is the unit title. We are going to go through lesson 3, which is concerning about the effects of smoking and even gaseous exchange in plants. Last time, on the last lesson, which was lesson 2, we discussed about respiratory diseases. And the respiratory diseases, we talked about diseases that attacks the respiratory system. And these diseases are examples. We talked about tuberculosis and how the signs and symptoms and the way of preventing it from human. We also talked about the asthma. We talked about the emphysema. We talked about chronic bronchitis. We talked about the number of diseases that attacks the respiratory system. We've been mentioning about the signs and symptoms, how these diseases attack the respiratory system, the breathing mechanism, the breathing process. Where I also brought what you call coronavirus, which is also a disease which is also very serious that attacks respiratory system. And it affects the breathing mechanism, and which eventually can lead a person to die. So we're going to talk about the effect of smoking. I know some of you stay with smokers. You may find that yourself, you don't smoke, but you stay in your residence, in your home state, you stay with a person who is a smoker. And eventually you may find you're going to suffer from this, you're going to suffer from the effects of smoking. And in that case, in biology, it is referred to as passive smoking. And you can inhale more smokes, more fumes, than a real smoker, and which can affect your respiratory system. So let's talk about some of the effects that affects the respiratory system, and which can lead into some of the complications in terms of breathing mechanism, which can lead into some of the diseases in our lungs. So the learning objective of the lesson we have to be able to explain in details the effect of smoking in the respiratory system. How does smoking process or smoking can affect our respiratory system? If I mention about the respiratory system in general, I'm talking about the breathing process, all right? We're going to describe the process of gaseous exchange in plants. How does plants make gaseous exchange? In the previous lesson, we talked about how plants gives us oxygen, and we give them carbon dioxide. And how does the plant able to absorb carbon dioxide? We mentioned about the diffusion. All right? So let's start our lesson. I will come in my lesson, so enjoy the lesson now. Let's start the lesson. The effect of smoking on the respiratory system. What is smoking? Smoking is the process of inhaling a fume or a smoke into our body. And most of the time when you're a smoker, takes in tobacco. Okay? We have tobacco, and tobacco is very dangerous because one of the major components that makes tobacco, we have nicotine and tar. Nicotine and tar are the major components of tobacco. Tobacco smoking is common because it is increasing day by day. And one of the effects of smoking, we have ever realized it, is what you call cancer, lung cancer. Most of the big percentage who are suffering from lung cancer are smokers. So let's go and talk about the effect of smoking in our respiratory system. The respiratory system is not designed to cope with tobacco smoke. The way how the structure of the respiratory system or the lungs are not designed to be able to cope with the tobacco smoke. Tobacco smoke paralyzes the cilia because there are some of the areas which are normally beating and trying to purify the air that we breathe and becomes to be a healthy air. Once those areas become paralyzed, they are no longer be able to purify the air we are breathing in, the respiratory tract, and stops their movement. So eventually, the respiratory tract will be no longer be moving because the areas has been paralyzed. Tobacco smoke increases the production of mucus, because once you're a smoker, that's why most of the time you find some people who are really smoker, who are daily smoker. Most of the time you find they are ever releasing what we call a sputum day by day, because there's more production of the mucus in their passages, in their air passages, and you try to release that mucus from their air passages. And that production of the mucus, once it is increased in the air passages, that one cough, and even by a smoker, is attempt to remove the excess mucus from the respiratory system. In most of the time, you find a person is trying to attempt to cough in order to attempt to remove the excess mucus from the respiratory system. Most of you stay with smokers. They have a habit of always coughing. Is coughing because there's more production of the mucus and their respiratory passages, and he tries to cough in order to attempt to remove the excessive mucus from the respiratory system. So that's what I'm trying to mention. So let's talk about, we talked about cigarette. When a cigarette smoker is inhaled, about 1/3 of the particles remain in alveoli. One of the particles, as I mentioned, one of the major particles of tobacco, we have the tar and nicotine. The tar and nicotine are these particles that remains in alveolar sacs. They cannot be released out. Phagocytic cells, called what we call microphage, can thoroughly remove many of these particles. We have some of the way how the body can try to defend itself against disease-causing agent. So some of the body can also try to remove those things by doing what we call a phagocytic process, where they have to be surrounded and engulfed, and eventually they're going to be released from the body by the process we mentioned it, by process of exocytosis. However, an excess particles from smoking or from other source of air pollution breaks down the walls of air sacs and cause the formation of inelastic tissues. Makes the tissues, because we said one of the properties of respiratory passages, the lungs and the likes, and other parts of the respiratory tissues, they are elastic. They are able to expand. But because of these particles that accumulates in the respiratory passages, will cause the tissues to become inelastic. Some of the people can also, let me talk about people who are staying in the mining areas, can inhale very many particles, and which can cause, or which can eventually stop the expanding the muscles to become elastic and become inelastic. In that process, the muscles are no longer able to expand, and eventually you may have a breathing problem. Have you understood that? So I said once these air pollution, smokes from tobacco, once they remain in air passages, they can cause the formation of inelastic tissues, and they are no longer to be able to expand. And eventually, you start from suffering eventually you have what you call a breathing problem. Let me try to, this reduces the function area of the respiratory surfaces. Once the tissues are inelastic, they are not able to expand. This will reduce the functioning area of the respiratory surfaces, and in severe cases may lead to a disease called what you call emphysema. In severe cases, it can lead to what you call emphysema, where the muscles are no longer able to expand. The muscles, the tissues are inelastic. They are not able to expand during inhalation and exhalation. And in some cases, a person will suffer from lung cancer. I have a diagram here. The diagram is well elaborated. I have 2 lungs. All right, I have the 2 lungs. You can see as I mentioned it earlier at the beginning, that once of these particles are not removed from the lungs, what happens? Automatically, the lungs become to be unhealthy. I have two lungs, as you can see. We have that one on the right side, and we have that one on the left side. This one is the left, and this one is right. Try to observe clearly, and you try to mention to see which of the two lungs, one is normal, another one is unhealthy. One is suffering from disease, another one is not suffering from disease. The left one and the right one. Try to observe properly, and then you will tell me. So properly, if I try to auto-locate, we have something which is like a dark here. All right? Cancerous lung. This is a lung which is suffering from cancer. We have this lung which is healthy. It is not affected at all. It is healthy. So I can conclude by saying that smoking can just be one of the agents or one of the processes can lead into lung cancer. Because these the nicotine, are not removed from the lungs and eventually can cause some of the muscles to become inelastic and eventually lead into lung cancer. We have the figure below, we have a normal lung, which is this one, healthy lung, and a lung with cancer. So it means that that one on the right side is suffering from cancer, and this one is a normal lung and it is functioning normally. So gaseous exchange in plants now. So before I just go back, let me just go back and I try to highlight something. So smoking is one of the agents that causes lung cancer. In terms of numbers, or in terms of quantification, we can mention that almost 90% of the people who are suffering from lung cancer are smokers. And also people who are even staying maybe in mining areas where they just inhale what you call air polluted, which can also lead into lung cancer. Also, smoking can also lead into what you call chronic bronchitis, a disease that affects the lungs. Not only that, smoking is also very dangerous because it makes the muscles or the tissues of the lungs to become inelastic, and once they become inelastic, so breathing becomes to be a problem, and which can lead into some of the diseases, as I mentioned, lung cancer, emphysema, chronic bronchitis. These are one of the outcomes of smoking. So I would like to tell you, don't smoke. You're not, because smoking is unhealthy to our body because it can lead into very many diseases. Let's go to gaseous exchange in plants. How do the plants make gaseous exchange? Because in the previous lesson, we talked about gaseous exchange in human. Now we're going to talk about gaseous exchange in plants. How do the plants do gaseous exchange? How do they carry out gaseous exchange? As we saw it in human, we saw the mechanism of breathing. We talked about gaseous exchange. So now we're going to talk about gaseous exchange in plants. The principal gaseous exchange surface for plants are the leaves. Most of the plants, they carry out gaseous exchange by using an organ, its organ, which are the leaves. Plant leaves are the site for gaseous exchange. And what makes the leaves to be the site for gaseous exchange? The leaves has small holes or small pores, which are called stomatas, or stomata pores on their surface, where gaseous exchange occur. So stomatas are to plants as lungs as to human. You get me very well? Stomatas are to plants because they are the site for gaseous exchange, as the lungs are to human. Plants do not have a specialized respiratory system like that animals. This is because their metabolic is less active than animals. For us, we have a specialized respiratory system because we are metabolically we are very active compared to the plants. But plants, they don't have a specialized respiratory system because they are less metabolically active. If they are less metabolically active, they don't need a specialized system for gaseous exchange. Only as long as there's presence of stomatas, they are able to open and expand, and now the gaseous exchange will occur. Stomatas, as I mentioned, stomatas are pores that are normally found between the guard cells. Some of you, if you remember properly, if I'm trying to draw the diagram, I'm trying to show you the diagram. These two are called the guard cells. These are guard cells. And the pores which are normally found here, these are called stomata. So the opening of these two guard cells are called these are called stomata. Stomatas are pores between the guard cells, and they are found on upper and lower epidermis. When we talk about the internal structure, if we have the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis, we're going to see it. Stomatas can just be distributed either in upper epidermis and lower epidermis, but that one also depends on the type of plants. Because if we take an example, we have hydrophytes. If I mention about hydrophytes, these are plants that are found in water-gorged areas. Then mesophytes, we have mesophytes. These are found in medium areas. We have xerophytes. They are normally found in arid areas. So it is not very common to find that the xerophytes, their stomatas are found in the upper epidermis. They are deeply found, they are normally found inside, not in the upper epidermis or lower epidermis. It also depends on the type of plants. As I mentioned, we have hydrophytes, we have xerophytes, and we have the mesophytes. I said hydrophytes, they are found in water-gorged areas. Then xerophytes are found in the dry areas. So that one also, the environment where they are staying also makes them the way how stomatas are distributed in the leaves. So as I mentioned, the upper epidermis and even lower epidermis, or they can also be found in both upper and even in lower epidermis. Stomata arouse the entry. What does stomata do? We have to understand the function of a stomata. One of the functions of stomata, the entry of carbon dioxide into the leaf during the process of photosynthesis, because carbon dioxide, as we talked it, is a raw material for photosynthesis. During evaporation of water in biology is referred to as transpiration, loss of water in form of vapor. So plants also, stomata is also very important to carry out the process of transpiration, evaporation of water, loss of water in form of vapor. So stomata also carry the function of evaporation. When the water is too much in a plant, the plant can also lose water in terms of evaporation when it is too hot. Not only that, evaporation is also very important to enable the plant to absorb water, because once the plant loses more water, it has to absorb more water in order to replace the lost water. Are you with me? So let's go to stomatas are the main structures for gaseous exchange in leaves of the plants. In the leaves of the plants, the stomatas are the main structures for gaseous exchange. They are tiny openings. If I said they are very small openings, they are tiny openings that are found in the epidermis of leaves. Most of the time, the stomatas are found in lower epidermis in some of the plants, with the exception of what you call submerged plants. Submerged plants, these are plants that are found in water areas, in water-gorged areas. So plants that are found in submerged plants are plants that are found in water areas. Stomatas are present in all the leaves of the plant. Most of the land plants have stomatas in lower surface of the leaves, as I mentioned. You have in your homestead, where you're staying, most of the plants these are most land plants, their stomatas are on lower surface of the leaf. Yes, stomatas allow gaseous exchange, as I mentioned it earlier, to take place in the leaves, because most of the time they need carbon dioxide to carry out the process of photosynthesis. So they need to allow carbon dioxide to enter and oxygen to leave from the leaf. Let us examine the structure of the stomata to understand how gaseous exchange takes place. We are going to examine and see how the structure of the stomata looks, and we are able to see how it carries the process of gaseous exchange. We have the diagram here, and you see there is now trying to expand. This is the nucleus, they are thin outer wall, they are thick wall, and also they have epidermal cells, we have chloroplasts, and you know the function of chloroplasts is to trap sunlight energy. And we have the stomata pores, they are now trying to expand. And once it expands, once the stomata expands, the guard cells also try to expand. In that way, eventually that one leads into what you call opening of the stomatas. And water leaving the guard cells. Once the stomata is open, water will be able to leave the stomata. I mentioned about water, evaporation of water. So once the guard cells open, automatically water will leave the stomata as in form of vapor. We have the closing of the stomatas now. Once the water is left, and now the stomatas are able to close. Once the water leaves the guard cells, the stomatas are able to close. And once they close, it means that there is no loss of water. Some of you see now we are in a dry season. Most of the plants, they shed off their leaves. And we can ask yourself, if the plant sheds off their leaves during a dry season, how will the plant carry out photosynthesis? The answer is this. Plant loses leaves purposely because once the sunlight hits the leaves, they're able to open, and once they open, water will get lost in the form of water vapor. And for the plant to minimize the loss of water, it decides to lose the leaves. And once it loses the leaves, the question is, how will the plant carry out photosynthesis? The answer is that they're going to carry out photosynthesis. Any part of the plant which is green can photosynthesize, not only the leaves. So any part of the plant, either the stems, the leaves which are green, are able to photosynthesize. So most of the time, the plants try to close the leaves when it is dry season in order to minimize the amount of water getting lost. Gaseous exchange, when stomata is open, gases come out into the leaf, while other come out. Oxygen, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, you know oxygen is a byproduct of photosynthesis. What happens? It diffuses out from the parasite layer cells into the air spaces, and eventually comes out through the stomata to the atmosphere. And now oxygen is going to be released out from the plant as a byproduct. On the other hand, what happens? The carbon dioxide, which is going to be entering because oxygen is going to be released as a byproduct, and now carbon dioxide is going to enter from the atmosphere. It will enter into the leaf through the stomatas into the air space. So that is the process of how the gaseous exchange takes place in plants. We have a diagram that shows the internal structure of a leaf, not external structure of a leaf. I know some of you have ever gone through that diagram. We have the upper part. We have this part which is called air space. You can see this is red and this is blue. It means that oxygen is diffusing and carbon dioxide is entering into the leaf, which is a raw material for photosynthesis, and goes into the air space. And now oxygen, which are in air space, has to leave out the stomata through the guard cell. These are the guard cells. And I remind you, the upper part of the leaf has got more chloroplasts because in upper epidermis, that's where more photosynthesis takes place compared to the mesophyll layer and even the lower epidermis. When you check on lower epidermis, there's what is found in lower epidermis. There's the guard cells, there's air space, and even a less number of chloroplasts. So that is a process trying to show the internal structure of a leaf and try to show you how the gaseous exchange takes place. You see the arrows. The red one are trying to show oxygen is leaving the leaf as a byproduct, but carbon dioxide is diffusing into the leaf through a pore which is called stomatas, and the guard cells are able to open, and carbon dioxide is going to diffuse and going to be stored in airspace, which is going to be used as a raw material for photosynthesis. This means that the concentration of carbon dioxide in parasite cells becomes lower than in airspace. Outside the cell, therefore, during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide diffuses into the parasite cell. The carbon dioxide will diffuse into the parasite cell from the airspace. Then, on the other hand, photosynthesis produces oxygen, whose concentration becomes high. Once the concentration of oxygen are increased in the airspace, that one will cause the carbon dioxide to diffuse and replace oxygen, which is a byproduct, and able to diffuse into the airspace. So higher concentration of oxygen in the parasite layer reduces the diffusion of carbon dioxide. As in human, once the carbon dioxide increases in the blood, what happens? Inhalation takes place. You are going to take in more oxygen to replace the carbon dioxide in the blood, which has been increased in high concentration. So that is, on the other hand, photosynthesis produces oxygen, whose concentration becomes to be high inside the parasite cells than in airspace, and that's supposed to be surrounding cells. So stems of the wooded terrestrial trees and even shrubs have areas of Ross arrangement cells with a large airspace. So these terrestrial trees and even shrubs, they have a large airspaces between them. These cells together form a structure called what we call lens cells. Lens cells are formed when the epidermis is replaced by the bark. And lens cells appear scattered on the surface of the stem as small raised open. So, students, we are winding and we are ending our lesson. And when we are ending our lesson, we have to give lesson assessment. We have to give you an assessment or an exercise. You call it an assessment, an exercise. So you're going to go through that exercise, and we are able to work on it on the next onset lesson of biology in senior 2. So number 1, I said, what are the structural differences between guard cells and other epidermal cells? Number 2, although the leaves are the main organs of gaseous exchange in plants, the roots also absorb oxygen in the soil. Why is this necessary? The roots can also absorb oxygen in the roots. Why is it necessary? So student, that is home assignment. I engage you to do the home assignment. And thank you for your active participation and listening, and even quoting some important words that I've been mentioning. I wish you to enjoy the rest of the day, and see you next time, and may God bless you.